The house of the Stahlbaum family stood quiet beneath a sky of falling snow. From every window drifted a gentle golden light that shimmered against the frost. Inside, laughter and warmth filled the rooms, where the scent of cinnamon and pine needles mingled with the soft crackle of a fire. It was Christmas Eve, the most magical night of the year. In the great sitting room, garlands hung above the doorways, and the tall Christmas tree stretched nearly to the ceiling. Tiny candles waited to be lit, and silver tinsel glimmered in the faint glow of the hearth. Every branch held something wonderful: little sugar ornaments, painted apples, and tiny golden nuts. But the tree was not yet finished. Behind the closed doors, the grown-ups were busy preparing the final surprises. 2 children waited outside those doors, full of wonder and excitement. Fritz, the older brother, could barely keep still. He was sure that father and their mysterious godfather Drosselmeyer were building a castle of toy soldiers behind those doors. His sister Marie was quieter. She held her small hands together and watched the light under the door with a soft smile. Her imagination was already alive. She dreamed of tiny carriages, fairies, and animals made of marzipan. Their godfather, Herr Drosselmeyer, was an inventor and a watchmaker. He wore a dark coat that smelled faintly of oil and brass, and on his vest glittered a dozen tiny tools. Sometimes his eyes shone behind his glasses, as though he knew secrets the children could only dream of. Marie adored him, though Fritz found him a little frightening, especially when his clockwork dolls began to move on their own. At last, a bell rang inside the room. The doors opened, and a flood of golden candlelight spilled into the hall. "Children," called their mother, her face glowing with delight, "the Christmas room is ready." Marie gasped. Before her stood the most beautiful tree she had ever seen, its branches shimmering with silver, its lights flickering like stars. Around its base lay a tiny world of wonders: castles, carriages, dancing dolls, and whole armies of tin soldiers. She could scarcely decide where to look first. Fritz darted straight to a shiny new horse, its mane made of soft white yarn. He shouted with joy and rode in circles, pretending to be a General Marie. Meanwhile, stood still, her eyes wide, her breath slow. Something on the table had caught her attention. There, beside a little wooden castle, stood a small figure, a soldier, carved from wood, dressed in a bright red uniform. His tall hat gleamed, and his face, though painted simply, wore a kind expression. He was holding his mouth slightly open, as though waiting to bite. Beside him lay a handful of walnuts. "Oh," whispered Marie, "he's a Nutcracker." Herr Drosselmeyer stepped forward with a smile. "Indeed," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "This little fellow is quite special, strong enough to crack the hardest walnut, and gentle enough to protect all your sweets from greedy hands." He winked at Fritz. Marie lifted the Nutcracker carefully. His paint was chipped in places, and one arm seemed a little loose, but she loved him instantly. There was something noble and kind about his painted eyes. She felt, though she could not say why, that he was smiling just for her. While Fritz was soon marching his soldiers across the floor, Marie carried the Nutcracker to a small armchair near the fire. She gave him a few tiny nuts and helped him bite them open, laughing softly each time she imagined he was thanking her for the company. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the candles had burned low, Marie crept back to the Christmas room. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, turning everything silver blue. The toys lay still in the quiet, but somehow the Nutcracker looked a little different, more alive, as if listening. She whispered, "Good night, little soldier," and tucked a piece of ribbon around his neck like a scarf. For a long time she sat there, watching the shadows move on the floor until her eyes grew heavy. Somewhere far off, a clock chimed midnight. The last flame in the fireplace flickered, and in that flicker, something changed. The room seemed to stretch, the Christmas tree towering higher and higher, its branches spreading like a forest of light. The dolls and soldiers stirred, and at the center of it all, the Nutcracker stood tall and proud, his wooden eyes gleaming like glass stars. Marie blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. The ticking of the clock grew louder. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And behind the walls, there was a faint rustle, like tiny feet scurrying in the dark. The magic of Christmas night had begun to breathe. Chapter 2: The Battle of the Mice. For a moment, everything was silent. The house slept, the snow outside lay heavy and pure, and Marie's breathing slowed as she drifted between waking and dream. Then, softly at first, came a sound, a tiny scratching, a patter like dry leaves moving across the floor. It grew louder, nearer, until from under the cabinet a whiskered nose appeared. Then another, and another still. Dozens of small, quick eyes gleamed in the dim light. Mice. They poured into the room like a grey wave, their tails twitching, their paws silent as dust. At their head came a creature larger than the rest, the Mouse King, with 7 crowns glinting atop his many heads and eyes like dull red coals. He sniffed the air and gave a hiss that rippled through his army. Marie wanted to scream, but no sound came. Her heart fluttered, but she stayed still, watching as the mice began to circle the Christmas tree, sniffing at the sugar figures and crumbs left from the feast. Then, somewhere in the shadows, a wooden click echoed. The Nutcracker straightened. He lifted his sword, a small toy blade of tin, but in that moment it shimmered like steel. The dolls stirred beside him, and the tin soldiers Fritz had lined up before bed now stood to attention. With a voice that seemed to hum through the air itself, the Nutcracker called softly, "Form ranks, my brave soldiers. Tonight we defend the realm of dreams." The Christmas tree glowed brighter, each candle flickering to life as if it heard his command. Light spilled across the room, and the toys sprang into motion. Drummers beat their tiny drums, trumpets no bigger than thimbles sang their call, and Marie could hardly believe her eyes. The battle began. The Mouse King's army charged forward, their grey fur glinting silver in the candlelight. Tiny swords clashed against tin, and the room filled with the strange, gentle music of wooden feet and tiny cries. The Nutcracker moved among his troops with calm bravery, his painted smile unbroken, even as the mice swarmed around him. Marie watched, wide-eyed, her hands pressed to her chest. Everywhere she looked, the world was alive. Her brother's soldiers, the toy drummers, even the gingerbread men joined the fight. Each candle on the tree swayed with the movement, and their waxy light made the air shimmer like golden dust. But the Mouse King was cunning. He pushed through the crowd, his 7 crowns clattering as he rose above the others, his claws striking at the Nutcracker's chest. The brave little soldier stumbled, and one of his arms bent backward with a sharp crack. "No," Marie whispered, and without thinking, she picked up her slipper from the floor. With all the courage she could gather, she threw it straight at the Mouse King. The soft shoe struck him squarely on one of his crowned heads. There was a sharp squeal, a flash of light, and suddenly the room fell silent again. The mice scattered into the shadows. The candles burned steady. The Nutcracker stood, breathing as though he were alive. He turned to Marie and gave the smallest bow. "Thank you, kind one," he said quietly. "Your courage has saved us all." Marie smiled faintly, the fear melting into warmth. Her head grew heavy. The battle faded from her mind like smoke in the air. The tree seemed to grow softer, the lights dimmer, and when she looked again, the Nutcracker was only a toy once more, still, small, and gentle in her hands. She curled beside him on the couch, the last flicker of candlelight dancing across her face. Outside, the snow fell thicker, covering the world in silence, and from somewhere deep within the walls, a quiet ticking began again, steady, patient, and full of promise. Chapter 3. The Dream of the Kingdom of Sweets. The world had gone quiet again. The flickering candles faded into soft golden haze, and the ticking of the clock melted into the rhythm of Marie's breathing. She drifted somewhere between sleep and waking, still holding the little Nutcracker in her hands. A silvery mist began to swirl across the floor, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The room around her stretched and softened, its edges melting away like sugar in warm milk. The Christmas tree shimmered, growing taller still, its branches reaching up like the spires of a cathedral made of light. Each tiny candle became a star, and each ornament a window into another world. Marie felt her feet lift from the carpet. She was floating, softly, weightlessly, carried by a breeze that smelled of snow and honey. Below her, the room had vanished. In its place spread a vast, shining landscape, a kingdom made entirely of sweets and light. The snow beneath her feet was made of sugar crystals, sparkling in pink and gold. Mountains of candied fruit glistened in the distance, and rivers of chocolate flowed quietly between them, their surface smooth as glass. The sky was pale blue and full of slow-falling flakes that never melted. It was a dream, and yet it felt as gentle and real as the warmth of her own heartbeat. Beside her stood the Nutcracker, no longer small and wooden, but tall and graceful, dressed in a soldier's coat of crimson velvet. His eyes were kind and alive now, and when he smiled, it was the smile of someone who had been waiting a long time to be seen. "Welcome, dear Marie," he said softly. "This is the Kingdom of Sweets, my home, and now yours too." She looked around in wonder. Little candy bells chimed in the air, and tiny snow sprites drifted by, their wings made of lace sugar. From the valleys rose a sweet scent of vanilla and almonds, and far ahead, on a hill of spun sugar, stood a glittering palace made of clear crystal. They began to walk, their steps silent on the sugar path. All around them, the world stirred. The gingerbread soldiers marched in cheerful rhythm. Marzipan lambs grazed in the soft snow, and the air was filled with a faint music, like wind chimes made of glass. Marie felt no fear, only peace. Each breath she took was light and easy, as if the air itself were filled with joy. They crossed a bridge of caramel over a chocolate stream, and beneath it, golden fish made of toffee darted playfully. At last they reached the great crystal gates of the palace. They opened without a sound, and a warm golden light spilled out to greet them. Inside, everything sparkled. The floor shimmered like ice, the walls glowed faintly pink, and chandeliers of sugar drops hung like frozen rainbows. A group of tiny figures came forward, bowing. They were dolls, elegant and graceful, each one dressed in shining silk and gold thread. They smiled at Marie and whispered, "The princess has returned. The curse is broken." Marie turned to the Nutcracker in surprise. He nodded gently. "It was an old spell," he said. "A wicked mouse king once cursed me to wood and silence. Only a heart pure and brave enough to help me could break it." He looked at her with warmth. "You did, Marie. Your kindness brought life back to this realm." She felt a soft glow rise within her chest, like the warmth of a candle in winter. The dolls led them to the great hall, where a table stood laden with everything sweet and beautiful. Cakes layered with snow-white icing, bowls of sugared fruit, and fountains that poured warm chocolate into silver cups. Marie and the Nutcracker sat together at the table. The tiny sugar sprites fluttered around, laughing softly from somewhere above. Music began to play, a tune that shimmered like snowflakes falling on water. For a long time they sat in peace. No words were needed. It was as if the whole world breathed in unison, a deep, calm rhythm, full of contentment. Then the Nutcracker stood and held out his hand. "Come," he said. "There is one more wonder you must see." He led her outside to a balcony high above the kingdom. From there, Marie could see everything: the glowing rivers, the candy hills, the lights twinkling like fireflies in the sugar air. Above it all stretched the endless sky, deep blue and full of golden stars. "Every star," said the Nutcracker quietly, "is a dream waiting to be remembered, and tonight you are part of them." Marie leaned against the railing and gazed upward. The stars seemed to move closer, their light blending with the warmth in her heart. She felt weightless again, as if she might drift up and join them to shine quietly forever among their soft, endless glow. Chapter 4: The Waltz of Snowflakes and Dreams. The night deepened, yet in the kingdom of sweets, time no longer had a name. There was no hour, no ticking clock, only a soft, unbroken stillness that shimmered like air after snowfall. Marie stood on the crystal balcony, her eyes lifted to the stars that gleamed like golden petals scattered across the velvet sky. The world beneath her glittered and whispered, alive with quiet music. From somewhere unseen, a melody began to drift, a waltz slow and tender, like snow falling in rhythm with a heartbeat. It wrapped around her shoulders like a silken shawl. The notes shimmered in the air, and as she listened, the snow itself began to dance. Tiny flakes gathered in the moonlight, turning to graceful figures of white and silver. They spun and bowed, their movements light as feathers, their laughter no louder than the sigh of wind in winter trees. Soon the air was filled with them, hundreds of snow dancers gliding through the night, each one unique, each one glowing softly from within. Marie watched, her heart swelling with quiet wonder. The Nutcracker, now the prince of this realm, appeared beside her. He offered his hand, smiling. "Would you dance with me, Marie?" She hesitated only for a heartbeat. Then she placed her small hand in his. It was warm, steady, real. They stepped into the night, and the snow parted around them, turning the air to shimmering ribbons of light. With every movement, the stars above seemed to follow, and the melody grew richer, woven with bells and soft strings. They danced slowly, as if the world itself were breathing to their rhythm. The palace below glowed like amber. Its windows mirrored the dance of snow and starlight. The rivers of chocolate reflected the sky like dark glass. and all the tiny sugar sprites gathered at the edges, their eyes bright with joy, their wings trembling in the rhythm of the waltz. It felt as if they were not merely dancing, but floating through a dream, a world where sadness could not enter, where every heartbeat was made of peace. The Nutcracker prince looked into Marie's eyes. His voice was a whisper. "Every snowflake that falls," he said, "is a dream the world has forgotten tonight." They returned to dance again. Marie felt tears of happiness rise in her eyes. Not the heavy tears of sorrow, but those that come when the heart is too full of light to keep it all inside. They spun once more, the air around them glowing brighter, until the snow dancers themselves turned into stars, drifting upward into the night sky. The melody softened, becoming no more than a breath, no more than a memory. At last they stopped. Marie leaned against the prince's shoulder, listening to the fading notes. Her eyelids grew heavy. The air was warm now, and the snow that had once been cold melted into soft mist, carrying the faint scent of vanilla and pine. The prince led her gently back toward the palace gates. Inside, the lights were dimming, and the dolls were slowly turning still again, their dance complete. He turned to her one last time. "Marie," he said softly, "dreams live in the spaces between moments. If you ever wish to return, close your eyes and listen for the waltz." She nodded, and for a moment the world blurred into light, gold, blue, white, the colors of peace. Somewhere far away, a clock began to chime. Not the grand clock of a palace, but the small, gentle ticking from the Stahlbaum house, the sound of home. And as the chime echoed through the dream, Marie felt herself drifting downward, like a single snowflake returning to earth, softly, quietly, without a sound. Chapter 5. The Awakening. The golden light of dawn crept softly across the room. It slipped through the lace curtains and rested on Marie's face, warm as a gentle hand. The waltz had faded, the snow had vanished, and yet, for a few long moments, the air still seemed to hum with quiet music. Marie stirred beneath the blanket that someone had laid over her. She was in her own bed again, the familiar scent of pine and cinnamon lingering faintly in the air. For a while, she didn't open her eyes. She simply listened. To the soft creak of the house waking, to the ticking of the clock on the mantel, to the faint crackle of embers still alive in the fireplace. Had it all been a dream? When she finally opened her eyes, the world was calm and pale with morning light. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, its candles now cold and still. The toys were where they had been the night before, silent and small. And on the chair beside her bed, there he was, the Nutcracker. Wooden again, his paint a little chipped, his tiny sword resting at his side. But something in his face was different. His smile seemed softer, his eyes a touch warmer, as though he remembered everything that had passed in the night. Marie reached out and held him gently. The wood was cool beneath her fingers. She whispered, "Good morning, my brave soldier." The door creaked open, and her mother peeked in. "Oh, you're awake, my dear," she said, smiling. "You fell asleep by the tree. Your godfather and father carried you to bed." She stepped closer and brushed a strand of hair from Marie's face. "You were dreaming, weren't you? You smiled all through the night." Marie nodded slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "I dreamed of a kingdom made of light and a prince who was once a toy." Her mother laughed gently. "Ah, what a lovely dream. You always did have a beautiful imagination." And with a last kiss on her forehead, she left the room, humming a Christmas tune. Marie sat up and turned the Nutcracker over in her hands. For a moment, she could have sworn she felt a faint warmth in the wood, as though a heartbeat lived quietly beneath the paint. She rose and went to the window. Outside, the world was covered in snow, soft, deep, unbroken. The morning sun had turned it to a field of gold. Smoke drifted from chimneys, and bells rang faintly from the church down the street. Everything looked ordinary, and yet a single snowflake touched the glass and lingered, shimmering faintly before melting away. In its reflection, Marie thought she saw, just for an instant, a flash of crimson velvet and the kind eyes of the Nutcracker prince. She pressed her hand against the window, smiling. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet certainty. The dream had been real as the warmth of the sun now on her skin. Behind her, the clock began to chime again. 1, 2, 3, each note clear and soft. The world seemed to breathe with her. She turned back to the chair where the Nutcracker sat. The light caught on his painted face, and for a moment it looked as though he winked. Marie laughed quietly. Then she placed him carefully on her pillow and whispered, "Rest now, you've earned it." The house filled slowly with the gentle sounds of morning, footsteps, voices, the rustle of paper and ribbon. But in Marie's room, time seemed to pause. The dream still lingered, like candle smoke that refuses to fade. Outside, snow continued to fall, each flake delicate, perfect, each one a story returning to earth. Chapter 6, The Promise of Christmas Morning. The sun had risen higher now, and the golden light touched every corner of the house. Outside, the world glowed beneath a soft white hush. Each rooftop carried its crown of snow, and the trees sparkled with frost, as if they had been dusted with silver. The town still slept, but in the Stahlbaum house, the air was filled with gentle laughter and the rustle of morning. Marie dressed quietly, still holding the Nutcracker in one hand. His little painted eyes looked calm, content, as though he too enjoyed the peace of this new day. When she stepped into the sitting room, the Christmas tree was still standing proud and tall. Its candles had been relit, and their soft glow shimmered against the ornaments. The scent of pine, wax, and warm bread filled the air. Her brother Fritz was already playing with his soldiers, marching them across the carpet in neat lines. "Marie," he called, laughing, "my army has conquered the Candy Fortress." She smiled, kneeling beside him, and for a moment she almost told him everything. About the battle that had truly been fought, about the brave soldiers who had come alive in the candlelight, about the Mouse King and his 7 crowns. But she said nothing. Some dreams, she thought, are meant to stay quiet, like secrets between the heart and the stars. Godfather Drosselmeyer entered the room, his golden watch gleaming, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "Well, my dear," he said with a knowing smile, "did you take good care of my little Nutcracker?" Marie held the toy close. "Yes," she whispered, "I think he took good care of me too." Drosselmeyer chuckled softly, as though he understood more than his words would ever say. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then that," he said, "is the best kind of Christmas magic." He turned to tend to the fire, and for a moment Marie saw something unusual, a faint shimmer of light around him, like the reflection of a hidden star. She blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the simple warmth of the hearth. Breakfast came and went, sweet rolls, steaming cocoa, laughter echoing against the windows. The family talked of gifts and stories, but Marie's thoughts wandered, drifting back to the kingdom she had seen, the sugar bridges, the crystal palace, the waltzing snowflakes that rose into the stars. Each memory felt as clear as the sound of bells, and each one settled in her like a secret promise. Later that day, when the house had grown quiet again, Marie returned to her room. The snow outside fell in lazy spirals, and the afternoon light was pale and tender. She set the Nutcracker on the window-sill, where he could look out at the winter sky. The light touched his painted face, and in the reflection of the glass, she thought she saw him smile. Not the painted smile of a toy, but a living one, full of warmth and gratitude. She whispered, "If dreams are real somewhere, then I hope you're happy there." And deep in her heart, she thought she heard a voice answer, soft and distant as the wind in the snow. "I am dear Marie, and I will never forget you." The room grew still again. Only the faint ticking of the clock and the whisper of falling snow remained. Marie lay down, her eyes drifting toward the ceiling, where the morning light danced like the glow of 1,000 tiny candles. Outside, the bells of the town began to ring, their tones soft and clear, each note a blessing carried through the cold air. And in that moment, half waking, half dreaming, Marie understood something true, that Christmas is not only a day of gifts and lights, but a promise of warmth that returns every winter, a quiet assurance that love, once found, never truly fades. Her eyes closed slowly, and the smile on her lips was calm and certain. Beyond the glass, the snow kept falling, each flake perfect, each one carrying its own little light, 1,000 tiny dreams, coming gently home.